So guys, when you go and open your presents, they come in boxes.
Yeah.
And what are boxes? Containers.
I suppose they are containers.
They are containers. Now, obviously, a box is fairly standard. You don't do a lot of kind of thinking outside the box with boxes. But,
Jeez.
I know, genius. But one thing that is tailorable and adjustable to your needs is a Lion container.
Very, very true. Mel, do you use Lion containers?
Do you know what? I have been in a Lion Containers gym where they've made a shipping container into a gym, and it was brilliant. There were too many mirrors, I won't lie. But if I'm doing a deadlift, I don't want to see myself doing it.
From several angles.
Yeah, exactly. From every angle. Why a 45-degree one up?
Yeah.
I don't need that at all. Let me believe I look like Jennifer Lopez from the back. Just let me have that. But it was very cool, very insulated and all of that. French windows. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing what you can do with them, really.
Yeah, and if you want something that we can tailor to your specific needs, we suggest you go to Lion Containers, who very kindly sponsor this show.
Absolutely. You can check them out on lioncontainers.co.uk.
Hello and welcome to 4 Wales See Wales with me, Mel Owen.
Me, Robin Morgan.
And me, Will Hayward.
Guys, how have you been? What's been going on?
I'm very well, thank you for asking. In the sort of slow run up to Christmas, things are sort of calming down a little bit. It's quite nice. I'm enjoying it. Are you feeling festive?
I'm feeling pretty festive. I've tried to do my Christmas shopping, and I realised that everyone whose present I've bought, I only bought it because I also wanted that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I got my mum a present, and I also wanted that thing.
Yeah.
So I essentially have now done her Christmas shopping, but essentially because I'm buying for myself.
Well, it's lovely that you got the same taste, though. Or do you think she's going to like it, or have you just bought it because you want it?
She probably won't like it as much as me.
Brilliant. I cannot wait to find out what it is.
I think, but this is the brilliant thing about Ann Summers, that there's the place has so much range.
It really does.
There's something for everyone, I think.
There's a for mum section, famously, yes.
The MILF section.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
What the fuck is this happening?
The way you walked into that, I was like, as you were saying it, I was like, is he okay? Does he realise what is about to happen?
No, let's not say I walked into an Ann Summers mum joke.
You didn't walk into it, you set it up, if anything.
She watches this.
Well, she's got to be...
She's going to look hot.
We do have to address something. Will, what's going on?
What do you mean?
You, in the words of Avril Lavigne, he is a skater boy.
So I'm wearing a hat.
You're wearing a hat?
I'm wearing my Time Team hat.
Yeah, you're wearing it backwards for listeners of the podcast. This is why you should watch on YouTube, by the way, because listeners do not get the beautiful Ash Ketchum from Pokemon vibes that Will is putting out there. I think you look great. No, genuinely, I know I've just been
Weirdly,
mean.
it does suit you.
Yeah.
It's very young.
It's made him look so much younger.
Yeah.
Is it partly because I've gone clean shaven as well?
It's giving year
Could be
8.
that as well.
Giving
year 8. Yeah.
But why the Time Team hat?
The Time Team hat is because I'm quite hungover and
From all the digging.
Because I wanted to excavate a small mansion before I left.
Yeah.
Sure.
Are you guys? We mentioned before you haven't really watched Time Team, have you?
No, I'm going to be honest with you. I know of its existence, but I wouldn't say I'm a stan.
Yeah, same. I'm aware that it is. Well, does it exist anymore?
It exists on YouTube.
Sure.
They did like well over 20 seasons. I love Time Team.
And Time Team was the excavation show where they send people into holes and they go, oh, we found some bones.
Tony Robinson would walk around and be like, we're over at Trench 3 and they found a bit of pot. And I'd be like,
Yeah, nice.
It's so good. And my hat is quite dirty, but it's mainly, this is what I use when I go fossil hunting.
And how often, I didn't think I'd be asking this question today. How often do you go fossil hunting?
Not as much as I'd like.
Yeah, well, no, of course.
my family, we used to go down on holiday to Lyme Regis. I was 7 when I got my first chisel.
It's
a big day for everybody, isn't it?
That was like My Chemical Romance when I was a young boy.
Took me down to the beach to find a plesiosaur.
I'd like to ask, when we get guests on the podcast, I'd like to ask everyone, how often do you go fossil hunting? I feel like that's going to be my go-to.
It's a given.
Yeah.
Everybody goes fossil hunting.
That's the
right?
question of the show from me. That's my go-to question. I
Yeah,
think,
I
for
love
any
that.
future politician. How often do you go fossil
That was
hunting?
an excellent segue because we are actually planning guests, aren't we? We've got some guests booked for the new year.
Indeed.
Ooh.
Very exciting. Some big names.
Big names in a Welsh context.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes. Also, Welsh politicians, there is probably a chance they've gone fossil hunting.
Do you think so?
Well, I mean, half of the Senedd is basically fossilised.
There it is.
There
it is. We've got some great guests. We've also got a date for our first ever live show.
Oh my God, I can't believe this.
It's exciting, right?
It's so exciting.
It's happening.
Yes.
We're going to do a live show. It's going to be on Sunday, the 2nd of March.
St David's Day weekend.
St David's Day weekend. I believe around midday, an afternoon show.
Yeah, I think it's about kind of 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock-ish at the Glee Club in Cardiff Bay. So if you feel like Welsh politics is too Cardiff Bay focused, we agree with you.
Yeah, you're going to hate this. Yeah.
And we booked it in there at Wales's only comedy club, the Glee Club in Cardiff. And tickets are going to be available soon.
Yes.
New Year-ish,
Yeah,
isn't it?
New Year.
Yeah.
There'll be tickets, but put that date in your diary. It's not late. It's kind of afternoon. Go have yourself a little roast and then come out and join us.
Yeah, exactly.
Have a little Rosy D.
We'll have a few.
Yeah.
We'll
Do you do Rosy D? Roast dinner? Rosy D?
Oh.
I
didn't know what that was.
I've never called it a Rosy D, but bless you, you did that thing that I do when I don't know what's going on. I just go, smile and nod, smile and nod, smile and nod.
absolutely.
Love Rosie D. She's
Rosy
great.
D. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a rapper, isn't she?
I don't know if you noticed my backwards hat.
Yes, we did.
Rosy
yeah.
D's a great rapper
It
name.
is, yeah, it'll be great.
Really strong.
Just gonna write it down. For
Yeah, yeah.
the new year, my New Year's resolution,
Yeah,
guys.
maybe you can open the show as Rosy D.
Oh yes, absolutely. I'll come out and do a rap.
I'd love that.
Brilliant.
Me and Will backing dancers.
Like an NSYNC.
I'll be your hype man.
Lovely, thank you. Well, I can't wait. What a lovely thing to look forward to in the new year.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we want to do as well is we're trying to build a bit of a community around this. So we'll grab some drinks for people if they want to hang around afterwards.
I think so.
Yeah, be nice, unless they're really weird.
Yeah. And feel free to bring your hawks and eagles. But you have to
Trilobites.
Say again.
Trilobites. Oh,
It's a fossil, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's a
Okay.
Cretaceous shell animal.
Yeah.
I can feel my virginity growing back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, why don't we just talk about my mum's fucking underwear, shall we? Will that make you feel better? Right.
Oh, okay.
Guess what I did last week?
What did you do last week?
I went down to our nation's parliament, the Senedd, and I interviewed the Plaid Cymru leader, Rhun ap Iorwerth,
Call him by his proper name.
the Rhunicorn.
Brilliant.
How is the Rhunicorn?
He's well. He was annoyed
I
about.
was going to say he's Welsh. I was like, no, I got that.
Oh yeah, it's well.
It's quite obvious.
He's mentioned.
Yeah, he's mentioned it. He's was a bit annoyed that after a poll came out which said Plaid were the largest party, that no one noticed or cared.
Interesting, because everyone else was talking about reform.
Yeah, yeah, that was a real frustration for them. I think that kind of underlines how hard it's going to be for them.
Always the bridesmaid type energy.
Always a bridesmaid providing policy for the bride.
Yeah. Really studious bridesmaid.
Yeah. So I asked him kind of where you think he thinks we are in kind of Welsh politics at the moment. And one of the things he said was, now you can interpret this how you like, and like obviously he would say this, but he said, after 25 years of devolution with Labour in the hot seat, one of the biggest enemies, I think, of change is people not believing change is possible. I get the feeling that people are starting to think that Labour's eternal rule is not inevitable, and I think it's a really positive place for us to be. It's really challenging for us because now, with people clearly starting to believe in our vision, we have to step up and show that we can turn that vision into reality. So I agree that people are feeling like Labour's dominance. I mean, they're never going to be kind of a wipeout situation. They're always going to, well, in 2026, they're almost certainly going to be like one of the largest parties.
Yeah.
But there is a feeling that there's no guarantee now that they will lead the next government.
Really big turning point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's for a number of reasons, such as the parliamentary seats changing, number of Senedd members, etc. But also what's happened within Wales, but also sort of globally, any incumbent struggling. But yeah, I think for Plaid, this is not make or break, but this is the big chance,
Yeah,
right?
this is, if there ever was a moment for them, this feels like it,
for sure.
doesn't it? It's interesting what you were saying about, the annoyance that there wasn't more conversation about the fact that Plaid are the biggest or projected to be the biggest party. But I feel like had there been that huge bit of conversation about it, it maybe would have resulted in them taking their foot off the pedal a bit.
Yeah.
So from his point of view, maybe that isn't a terrible thing because it gives them the promise that even at the moment, that is still a possibility, but they still need to keep working for it. And it's definitely not a given. You know how Keir Starmer kind of didn't really, the Labour tried in the general election, but they really could have tried harder as well. But they just knew the Tories were going to hang themselves.
They needed to do just enough.
Exactly. They just needed to be better than the Tories, whereas Plaid don't have that comfort of they just need to be a bit better than Labour. Labour still have a good chance of winning, the majority again. So from his point of view, I don't know if that's a terrible thing strategy-wise.
It's an outlook thing, right? Sort of. I think everyone saw the UK Labour Party as the government in waiting. It was kind of assumed, wasn't it? In all the run-up, it was like, well, you're going to win. We're going to win if you're inside the Labour Party. Whereas, I suppose if Plaid had the option of, people know you're going to win, and this sort of cultural understanding is happening, I'm sure they would take that. But it's so close, isn't it? That I think, this might have lit a fire up them, and that they can't just coast now. They've got to.
Yeah, I think you're both right. I think you're both right. I think what is interesting with Plaid is a lot of that lead is down to, as we've said in previous pods, is down to Labour, a fall in Labour popularity, so a decline in Labour. So essentially, that's brought Plaid above them rather than a huge surge in support for Plaid. But actually, what that does mean is that there's a lot of low hanging fruit for Plaid still to get. If most of your lead is made up of the other side declining, actually, if you can make a really good offering, there's a chance that you can extend that lead and you can actually grow essentially because at the moment, I do think part of the reason why people weren't like, oh my God, look, Plaid have done it, is because it was by 1 percentage point.
Yeah, it wasn't a stonking lead by any means, was it?
Yeah, I suppose,
it's the margin of error.
Those Labour leads in the UK one were 20-point leads.
Exactly. Whereas the Reform, climb from nothing to where they are now is a stonking increase.
And I think as well, the reality of what a large Reform party would mean for Wales and the wider UK is probably in some ways more transformational for many people in quite a scary way. With Plaid, ultimately, if they won 30% of the vote and they went into an alliance with a coalition with Labour, that isn't the same as the SNP winning an outright majority in Scotland, just because they wouldn't have an outright majority. But that kind of takes me on to there's kind of there's four parties which essentially will make up 90% of the Senedd under this projection. So you've got Reform, the Tories, Plaid, Labour. And that distribution is fairly equal before. Obviously, Tories are a bit lower than the others. But because of how they've all positioned themselves, they can really, although there's four parties, there's only two things that can happen. You can only really have Plaid and Labour working together and Reform and the Tories working together. Unless the new leader, Darren Millar, decides to realign his party, which, I mean, if you think Labour's task is tough over the next years, I think him getting his party to be more palatable to Labour and Plaid is what's your feeling?
It's a monstrous feat. I think Darren Millar try and make the Conservatives electable by 2026. And I also don't know anything about him really, other than what we discussed in the last episode. So I don't know if he is the man for the job. I don't know who would be the person for the job, to be honest with you.
I mean, when we were talking about RT going, I think we either said it on a pod or straight after the recording. It's unenviable, that job of you're basically going to be in it until you're not going to do well.
No.
You're just coasting now. You're just sailing a ship into the iceberg, essentially, aren't you?
Yeah.
He seems cheery.
Yeah.
In all the bits and bobs.
He seems happy to be there.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say for him, I spoke to people within Plaid and Labour, and although he'll kind of drink the Kool-Aid in interviews and stuff, he's seen as quite a good parliamentarian. He's quite diligent in
he's been there a while, to be fair, isn't he? He's one of the stalwarts of them.
And I think there's an argument for a less combative leader, very different to RT, getting involved in the culture wars online and things. It doesn't seem like he's doing that. It feels like he's the content I've seen him he put out online of little sketches, little videos of him
I
walking.
haven't seen
Oh, mate, the video of him walking into his first FMQs, they did like a bit. They did like, at the start of a stand-up special where you see someone like walking to the stage and there's like a little sketch before. He did a little sketch before he went into FMQs. It is. If think about how bad it would be, it's worse.
Oh,
so they're walking through the corridors and he's with Paul Davis, who was the Tory leader. Yeah, a couple of leaders ago.
We've all been leaders.
But like they're walking through the corridors, but instead of like just filming them, there'd be like a closed door and they'd open it and walking through. But
Very
he'd always
Sorkin West Wing type stuff.
But he'd always say like, after you, Paul. So actually the guy who was like the leader was kind of at the back.
Oh god.
It was.
What is this? An appeal to the TikTok generation? Is that what this is? Is it an attempt at humour, or is it?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a look. There's a gaping hole, for lack of a better word, which Artie has left online with his tweets.
Yeah.
So there is obviously an online Welsh Conservative following that. So maybe doing little sketches and doing little walk and talks, and maybe he's going to be the new Farage. Maybe young men are going to love Darren Miller. I don't know. I don't know what the plan is for it.
Interesting. I can't wait to watch. What are they on TikTok, Instagram?
Bebo.
Bebo's great. Yeah. MySpace. Brilliant. Okay.
I asked the Runicorn. I so want to be credible. So I said, you say that people are seeing Labour in power as not inevitable, but even if the numbers were to go up or down 5%, it's hard to see Plaid in power without Labour having some role in government. Unless, of course, you're willing to work with Reform or the Tories, and you've given the impression that's not something you're inclined to do in the past.
Yeah.
And he said, I think you're right, which was nice.
Well done, Will.
Have you subscribed to my newsletter? We're moving from a situation where we had an electoral system that, while never giving one party a majority, it allowed Labour to have almost exactly half. That empowered them to govern alone most of the time. We're moving to a situation where parties will have to find a way of working together. That doesn't mean coalitions, but it will mean cooperation. But I make this point. Who will be in that First Minister role? And this is very, very important. Who is able to stand up as the head of the Welsh Government, head of Wales, if you will. And that's really, really important in terms of setting the tone. That's the change. We've never been in a position where Plaid has been projected to be the largest party in the Senedd. And that means being in a prime position to be First Minister. That changes Welsh politics. Forever.
Interesting. How do you feel about Rhun as an image of a leader?
I think he seems like he's got good leadership qualities. I think he's been a good leader for Plaid. It feels like he sort of, as we've said before, steered them from like rockier waters into a decent UK general election. It feels like he seems like a leader because the vast majority of leaders have been white dudes, right? Like, there's an element of that.
Yeah. But also there is something a bit refreshing about him despite that. He does seem quite refreshing. And like you say, it feels like a new image for Plaid Cymru that they kind of did need at that point. The general election was good for him. So I do wonder if, he probably does genuinely believe that there is a real chance that he could end up First Minister.
I mean, I think if he's not, that's surely seen as a failure.
Well, I asked him that exact question. I said, if you were not to become leader, is that a failure? Because Adam Price kind of famously said to me,
get out of my house, Will. Yeah.
I don't want to buy your ammonite. He said, no, it did a kind of classic. This was Rhun. He said, I just want to see where the chips fall. Like, I'm not I'll just say. Obviously, they're going to have, if they're not winning now, I don't see when they do. The circumstances are so good. But I kind of want to come on to that First Minister. I don't know if, I've got I think there's a lot of questions for Plaid Cymru to answer on a lot of stuff, and we'll in terms of how they're actually going to make this thing work, given they'll have the same financial constraints that Labour do.
Yeah.
But what I think is quite interesting, if they do get that First Minister role from the point of view of Plaid, so when you're First Minister, even if it's a almost 50-50 Labour-Plaid government, if you are the person in that main job, you are the person that goes to all the events, you are the person that stands, it's always first on the news, you are the person who essentially is that voice of Wales.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, what they can do is do what the SNP did in Scotland. So whether it was the Tories or Labour in Westminster, SNP can just pick a fight. They can essentially say, yeah, this isn't good enough for Scotland. We're not happy with this.
Well, Salmon and then Sturgeon did that very effectively,
Yeah,
right?
incredibly. But Elena Morgan can't really do that. She can't say, I'm standing up for Wales. Isn't that Starmer guy a bit shit? Oh, no,
Yeah, of
you've
course.
shortchanged us over HS2. Whereas Plaid wouldn't have that constraint. They could literally say, this is a disgrace. Why have we not got this money for HS2, for example? And when you can do that, it's really, everyone in Wales thinks, oh, this person's going out to bat for us.
Yeah.
And so I think from a kind of political perspective, Plaid are just all in on getting this First Minister. So there's ways it could work. They could become, the largest party. They get 30%. Labour get 20%. They end up with a small combination, essentially, because Plaid would be so much more than Labour. They would have the First Minister. Mm-hmm. You could also have essentially a minority government where Labour agree to supply Plaid with votes, but if it's really close, Labour won't be like, well, why would we do that? You should help us. Or you might have a situation where it's very, very close and they decide to have, they change the First Minister maybe after 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So you might have like a Labour First Minister and then a Plaid First Minister. But then that gets quite fiddly because what if whoever goes first after
Oh, yeah, I mean, that doesn't sort of scream stable government,
No,
does it?
that feels like an awful option.
there are places where it works, but it works where people are used to it. When it's like,
Sure.
And obviously everyone is quite used to just Labour being in power, I think it would blow the minds of some Labour members that they were not, the main party.
Logistically, what does that do in terms of people's day-to-day lives? Like, do parking spaces change? Do offices change?
Must do, mustn't it? Everyone would just, the end of your 2 years,
Yeah.
you get out of the First Minister's office, everyone, because you're not in that official role anymore.
Yeah, but also for Labour, who've had the same for 25 years, been the main part. Like, I know this is a weird question, but logistically,
Yeah.
Yeah. What if you were going to change halfway through?
yeah,
It'd be so funny because you also then have the party that's kind of no longer head of the government. They're much less invested in making this thing work then.
yeah.
This is what I'm saying, this whole thing feels like
It's
it
supply
wouldn't
teacher
work.
vibes.
Yeah, 100%. And no one takes supply teachers seriously anyway.
Yeah.
If
Sorry if you're a supply teacher, but you know it.
But yeah, you already know. I hope you've got a side hustle. Yeah. But yeah, that feels like an awful option. I suppose the benefit the Senedd has is that it's such a young institution that it is a bit more malleable and it is kind of subject to change and development and progression. So, trying that out in a new institution isn't that rogue. But I mean, logistically, that feels terrible.
Yeah, and I think it would also give reform an open goal of these people don't know what they're doing. How can we trust this person? They're going to be out in 6 months. It's very kind of
they're co-parenting.
Well,
Yeah.
if Labour and Plaid go into coalition, that means that in all likelihood, unless the Tories get their act together, reform will be the opposition.
Yeah.
Because they won't be in government. Whereas if you had a Plaid or Labour minority, the other party could be the opposition unless Plaid had more MSs. So it might be that they don't want to have, here is Labour and here is Plaid and Farage and co are against them. You might want to have a minority government where essentially the other party, and that'll be all things they're considering.
That feels real smelly to me. That feels like...
That feels non-democratic.
Yeah, it feels like you're really playing politics.
Yeah, that feels exactly like, at the end of the day, as much as, not trying to be unbiased here at all, I wouldn't want reform in any way, shape or form to be in government or opposition. But if that is what people vote for,
100%.
that is what they should get.
Yeah, I think how minority governments might work, it might be that they say, right, we're going to support you for Labour might say it's Plaid, we'll support you for the next year, but these are the 3 policy things we want and we'll get your budgets through.
Yeah.
So they'll allow the machinery of government to work. But then you get to the point where parties have got to kind of, for want of a better word, politic. They've got to kind of say, well, this party isn't allowing us to do this. And we're going to come onto this in the budget because Mark Drakefod is going to make an appearance saying the phrase day of reckoning in a bit.
Just to add very quickly on that note of, if people vote for reform and the figures show that they should have been the official opposition and then they're in a position where they've worked out so they're not, what do you think that's going to do to reform support? It's going to fortify it.
Yeah.
It's going to strengthen it. This is, if you force things underground or deny people this, it's only going to make it more appealing.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like if there is this... sort of feeling, this vibe at the moment, I think throughout all of politics, about being the incumbent struggling, people are sick and tired of X, Y, Z. I think Rhun at the head of a Welsh government, whether it is being propped up by Labour or in a coalition where it's a different face, I think the optics of that, I think, would look better to the majority of people thinking, oh, it's no longer a Labour government, or this is a bit of, you can see change there.
Yeah.
Whereas I think this Senedd, Rhun, two heads of a...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's likely because I don't think either party would want it.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be likely. I think you're right about the reform stuff. Like people, it's a democracy. If what people vote for is what they should get.
And let reforms show themselves for who they really are. At the end of the day, let people get what they voted for. And if reform do end up being the opposition, and let's be honest, they're not going to be a good one, let them show their true colours. They're not going to be ready.
Yeah, I mean, the hard thing with like oppositions is like you don't have to back anything up. Whereas, like, when you're in government, you actually have to make...
Well, you've seen this with Plaid at the moment, like when you asked your man a few months ago.
He's not my man, just to be clear. I hold all politicians in equal disdain. And that is actually true. My main emotion, it's not anything personal against any of the leaders, but my main emotion when I spend time in Welsh politics is, oh, for fuck's sake. Like, he's just a
That's really interesting. Like, why is that? Because I would say you're so introverted into it. So, like, why is that your general feeling?
Because I think the problem, and it's not anything personal, there's some very talented people within the Senedd, and there's some people who should have stepped down 2 elections ago and are just occupying space, in my view. There's some people who I look at and I'm like, what are you bringing to this table? Like, I think in politics, you do need that. You need that change. You need that. Like, if someone's been in a position for like 15 years, it's like, what's your, like, I just don't think that's good for politics. But anyway, what I do want to stress is I am not anti the Senedd. I don't think you can look at many democracies in the world and say, well, that is functioning absolutely fantastically.
Of course not. No.
From time immemorial, everyone has thought politicians are a bit crap and things aren't as good as they could be. It's really, really easy for me, especially as a journalist, to stand on the side and snipe. But what I do think is, one of the biggest problems Welsh politics has is a lack of engagement and a lack of kind of ambition for who leads us. I think we should want the very best. I think we should be disappointed when the people we elect just aren't producing a future that we think, it isn't like a future we deserve. It's like kind of the bare minimum that our public services should work. And I think a more engaged public would make politics better, but they have to be, it's how you engage them, and that's why there's such an open goal for the Farages of this world to just go, look at this, they've got no alternative, they've got no option. Like, essentially for them, the Senedd is a vehicle for funding to go for Westminster.
Yeah, it's not actually that many people, like 60 now, but even with 96, it's not that many people to be aware of. When you think of like the UK being 650, like you can hide on the backbenches there. 96 people, you should be visible and be held to account.
One bit of dead wood like stinks the place out.
Yeah.
Like if 6 people are a bit shit, that's 10% of your Senedd. 10% of your parliament just isn't very talented, and I tend to suggest it's slightly more than 6.
Yeah.
I asked Rhun Iorwerth about devolution, so I'd asked the same thing to Leonard Morgan. I said, what do you think is the benefit of devolution, and what has it done for Wales over the last 25 years? And her points were, she did the first one, which was there's loads of well-paid government jobs, but then came back with the free prescriptions, which actually I think you were saying, Robin, that's something really, really good.
Thrush.
we did talk about
Who
thrush.
could forget that?
So I said, obviously, for someone like yourself, a leader of Plaid Cymru, the merits of devolution are self-evident. For the very existence of Wales as a nation means that devolution should happen. But there are a lot of people who aren't inclined towards devolution from kind of the heart. So what would you say to them? How has devolution made their lives better for the last 25 years? And he said, devolution in itself is a positive thing. Devolution can bring real dividends and enable us to make decisions. We've had 25 years of Labour-led governments, and it's their failings we have to hold to account. Devolution could be stronger itself. We want devolution of administration of welfare, like they have in Scotland. We'd like devolution to be accompanied by making decisions on rail, like they have in Scotland. That could make a real difference. So it's not devolution, it's what's been done with it in terms of policy when it comes to health, for example. But he then added, when people say, so I'd asked a follow-up question about Andrew R.T. Davis, because he'd done a poll, hadn't he, on whether we should abolish the Senedd. He said, when people say we should go back to not having a Welsh Parliament, that is like saying that we don't want to be a nation, that we want to entrust all our decisions to the country next door. It's essentially saying you don't want to have a Wales. Normal countries don't do that.
That's a really strong point, though, in terms of there are many attitudes, I think, that Wales has, or some people do have as a majority probably, that you wouldn't find in many other countries. You know, even in terms of like attitudes towards the language, that feels like that still kind of is a point of contention between non-speakers and speakers, not across the board, but generally, or even whether or not we want devolution or not. And that's not a conversation you have in many other countries.
I think it comes down to that thing that we talked about in the episode about identity, about whether you identify as Welsh or British, because I feel like, you know, that's where those attitudes split, right? Whether you want... Except I was going to liken it to Brexit in terms of, yes, what other country, you know, people on the reform side want their country to be in charge of their rules.
Yeah.
But on that side, they would arguably want to give up those decisions in favour of the UK government, but that's because they are British, not Welsh in their eyes. But yeah, I think if any country to not have its own government, parliament, policies made from within seems to me a little bit silly.
It is what you find. Whenever I speak to, even people I spoke to at a reform conference, they would say if you had to put them in a camp, you would say they're anti-devolution, because they'd say things like, "Oh, the Senedd's rubbish. We need to get rid of it." And I said, "So do you think that decisions about Wales should be made in London?" And actually, when you say that, they're like, "Oh, well, I don't like London," and that is actually, I think, why reform have not gone overtly into abolish the Senedd. People in Wales, I think, don't want, quite like in principle, the idea that decisions are made here. They just want them to be made well. But what I thought was interesting that you said is that essentially devolution is a vehicle and Labour haven't driven it properly.
Yeah, it's a lack of self-confidence, isn't it? It's going, you know, I think the great majority of people probably want their own country to be ruled by themselves, but haven't seen it be done well. And are scared, or, you know, to kind of like, well, we're not going to do it well, so it might as well just be in Westminster.
Yeah.
So what I try and do with these interviews is, because it's not a particular topic, I don't want to just be like attack, because I think what I want to do for like readers of the newsletter, sign up, is I want them to feel that they are understanding the person there. And I don't want, if you just go after a politician, they tend to just shut down, and then you just get a bit of a shit interview. But I think it's very easy for Plaid. It's essentially Labour just have been in power for a long time, and Plaid can just go, well, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough. And it's, as we've discussed before, it's quite hard for them to actually, they haven't really put a huge amount forward as to what they're going to do. So I said to him, if I could wave a magic wand and you instantly became First Minister with a Plaid majority, but you have exactly the same financial constraints as Welsh Labour, what would be the first thing you do? You're not going to get any more powers. What are the things that you would do straight away that Labour aren't doing?
Great question.
He said, I'm not going to show you everything in our box of wares.
Oh, you went full unicorn there.
Yeah.
And then he reared on his hind legs.
Follow me into the forest. The forest of independence, Will.
Just started nodding. He essentially, after a lot of kind of back and forth, he said that, talked about the plan we talked about last week, where Plaid have said they want to change how the NHS is set up. So they have put forward some ideas with regard to that. But essentially, again and again and again, the thing that he said was, the impression he gives is actually, it's not something of policy, it's something of competence. So his differentiation between Labour and Plaid, he's not, with the exception of independence, which we'll come on to in a second, there isn't actually a huge degree of difference. There's a lot of overlap. So what he's essentially saying to the electorate is, we're not going to do massive differences in policy. We're going to be more competent. We're going to run things better. We're going to maybe restructure things. But it's not, we hate all these policies from Labour. It's more, we don't think they're doing it very well.
I mean, strategically, that is a risk, because he's asking what are they called? The voters, to jump off a cliff with him and go, just trust I'm going to be good.
Yeah.
At least with policy, you can be like, this is what we would do, and people can understand that. That's tangible. That feels like a big miss to go, just trust we'll be better. How do we know?
Also, you know, this, one of the criticisms about the Welsh Labour government has been their policy. 20 mile an hour has not been popular. Like a lot of the slightly left of centre policies that have come out of the cooperation agreement through Plaid, people haven't really tagged onto those. Although 20 mile an hour, what's the polling at the moment with that?
I actually think a lot of it's just kind of people are fairly apathetic to it now. There's people who will never ever be over it.
It's easy to get caught up in there. And I found myself, as I was saying it, like you hear so much noise about it, you just assume that it's like a completely, almost a whitewash of a negative policy.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you in terms of the just trust us. Here's my CV. Look at you can absolutely give me this job. I think the idea of going for competence, I think, is a strong angle of like we're not going to be shit at this. And I like confidence, and I like the idea of that's why Elined was talking about Liz Truss last week. The idea of like these guys don't know what they're doing. I think if that they can tap into that and go, we're going to run with confidence, because that's another thing that Starmer was criticised for. No hope. If we can be like, if
we've got a hope and ambition.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a decent angle.
Yeah, it's essentially, if you just change the leadership in any way, there is likely to be a bit of a kick up the arse, isn't there? And it is hard for Labour have been in power so long. Them and the civil service, they've worked together for a quarter of a century. Like those overlaps. I mean, I hate the idea of disruptors and stuff like that, and people who are going to come in and just change stuff for the sake of changing it. But so I think it would make a difference if Plaid were to lead the government. But I think what we can't get away from is we are all over reform for not having a plan for Wales. And at the moment, Plaid have put forward much more than reform, but they haven't put forward a huge basket of like, this is how we're going to do things differently yet.
Exactly. When you were saying, though, he was like, I'm not going to show you what's in my box of wares. Well, you kind of need to, Rhun. I'm not going to lie. Like, we'd have a go at reform, rightly so, for not telling us what they're going to do. Plaid need to tell us what they're going to do.
He said on economy he's going to bring in a Welsh development agency. So this will be, there used to be a Welsh development agency, and it was scrapped. So they're going to bring that back. But all of these things will only work if they work. I know that sounds like a weird statement to say, but you can... I mean, Wales is so good at coming up with like committees and like consultations and stuff, but actually it's in the application. So the final thing I'll say on him is I spoke to him for 23 minutes and he didn't mention independence once, unprompted. Didn't say it, didn't mention it.
Very interesting about Plaid's outlook going into 2026, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Adam Price was like the opposite. And I kind of get the point. If you are really behind independence and I say, well, how's this going to work? And you go, well, we need to be independent. That's the answer they always used to give, but he hasn't mentioned it at all. And I think he's putting like the economy and health at the centre of his offering. Now, kind of diehard Plaid supporters will say you can't fix them ultimately without independence. Yeah. But he is clearly trying to, I mean, when I pointed this out to him, he did say, he suddenly was like, I love independence. Like, we want to put this forward. I was talking about it earlier today. He said, I would like Wales to be independent now. Like, I'm not suggesting he himself is not supporting independence or Plaid doesn't, but they are clearly being smarter because they're trying to win over the votes of people who don't support independence, which is most people.
Yeah, well, you've got 18 months to win to potentially become First Minister. Don't overreach yourself.
Yeah. Get into power first and then assess.
I mean, the biggest selling point for independence would be a successful, functioning Wales. If I wanted to make independent people vote independence, you make Wales work really well.
Well, I suppose that's how the Scottish vote got so close, right? Because the SNP, people were happy with the SNP.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Even though, like, some of the SNP stuff was, I mean, some of their governance was bad, but they were able, like we said with like the First Minister, they were able to position themselves as the good things are us, the bad things are because of Westminster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So, last week, Mark Drakefod, who has more jobs than... who's had more jobs than?
George Osborne was the guy who had like 6 jobs at one point, right? Remember that?
He?
When he was like...
Yeah, and the editor of the Evening Standard.
Yeah, which is now obviously defunct.
And it's weird. Everything that George Osborne manages seems to go to shit.
Yeah.
Country, paper.
Royal Mail. That's gone now as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was his thing. Anyway, this hasn't really been the introduction that we wanted into this, is it?
The budget for Wales, see George Osborne. So basically, new budget came out. Welsh Government were given significantly more cash than they had before, than what they were expecting. Essentially, it was an additional 1.5 billion in resource and capital spending in the next financial year compared to the last financial year. And this is a big change because what they've had to do is essentially manage real terms cuts for quite a while.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot in there. So there's big budget increases for things like core NHS funding and local government, so councils. But there are other areas which are likely to see a real terms cut, but we just don't know what that looks like at the moment because this is a draft budget. There needs to be like more meat on the bones. The thing to say is this budget was actually really nice for Welsh Labour. They had money to spend, but essentially over the next couple of years, Wales is going to get more money because of spending in Westminster coming to Wales. But what they've done is they've front loaded it. So essentially this budget for this year, they're like, way! But next year, there's going to be much smaller increases because essentially, we're going into an election. We need something to offer. What's quite interesting, though, is how the parties, how they're going to get this budget through. So Mark Drakefod is going to have to try and pass this, and it's going to be a vote in the Senedd. There's 60 members of the Senedd. Labour have got 30, so they need someone else to vote with them. And they're
Jane
Dodds. Apparently they are in negotiations with Jane Dodds, but they're also trying to get Plaid to support it.
Yeah.
Now, the issue with this is Plaid came out back in September and said, basically said, we're not going to support anything unless HS2 is reclassified, we replace the Barnett formula, we devolve the Crown Estate, we'll come on to the Crown Estate at some point in the future, we end the 2-child benefit cap, and we restore the winter fuel payments. Now, obviously, that isn't very likely to happen.
Sure.
But they were setting their stall out to say, we're not supporting you unless you do this, which is kind of them saying, look how we're standing up for Wales. But Drakefod, when he was talking about the budget, he said he addressed the Plaid benches saying, I'm open to talks, but if that's not the business you're in, believe me, the people of Wales will see through you and the political games you think you can play with their future. There's 253 million for local government, and when you vote against the budget, you will be saying to those local authorities that you don't want them to have a single penny of it. This is what serious politics is about, and that day of reckoning is coming your way.
The day of reckoning is coming your way.
Would you like some Stilton?
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope he delivered it exactly like that.
I bet he did. That's I mean, it's pretty strong words.
It's interesting that Labour are like, in the past, Plaid have been very supportive of like trying to be cooperative, been a bit Lib Demi in the coalition about it.
A little bit Lib Demi.
Yeah. And I think Labour are trying to essentially say, we've got all this money from our great relationship with Westminster.
Our Lord and Saviour, Keir Starmer.
That's our Lord and Saviour.
Sorry, Darren.
Sorry, Darren. Yeah, sorry, Daz. And they want to say, look, we've got all this money, but Plaid won't let you have it.
Yeah.
Whereas Plaid are trying to say, they're trying to shortchange us. We're not going to allow it.
Yeah, I mean, both are trying to set out their opposing stalls for the next 18 months, right? And I think if I'm going to make a prediction, it'll pass with Jane, and it'll pass because I think the ramifications of it not passing are quite severe, right?
Yeah.
And Plaid probably know that.
Yeah.
They know it's going to pass, so really the ramifications of them opposing it are not that bad.
Yeah. Are they going to abstain? Can you abstain?
I think they'll vote against it because they'll be saying,
sure,
you haven't given us what we're demanding. Do you want to hear the Rhun Corn's response?
Brilliant.
The Exchanger, he said to me, the assumption is that Plaid Cymru will come to the table. That's not how politics work. It's not up to Plaid Cymru or anyone else to go up to the 5th floor to the Welsh Government and say, hi, we're ready to do a deal. It's up to the government.
Again,
I like that you added the hi. So,
yeah.
What's happening on this 5th floor? We have
Lee
this
Waters podcast.
Yes,
the
100%.
The 5th floor is where the Welsh Government operate within T Howell, which is the building next to the Senedd.
It feels quite Twilight Zone.
That does. The 5th. What a random number as well. Like the 5th floor.
Come up to the 5th floor. Oh shit! I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
I've been caught up to the 5th floor.
Not
it feels.
the 5th floor.
Yeah.
No. Yes. Oh god. Also, like you said, the hi as well. Hi.
Yeah, he said hi. We're ready to do a deal.
Knock.
It's an assumption that we do that. Yeah. So it's now kind of Christmas. The kind of day of reckoning will come in the new year, which will be quite fun. But I think it's going to be really interesting how that plays out. I think ultimately it'll end up with Lib Dem does a deal.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what deal she would get. I think she'll probably lobby for like social care and more rural support.
Oh, I'd want like a big old like throne.
Yes, yeah, 100%.
A staff.
It's just for me anyway.
A big Jane Day once a
Yeah.
week.
Or like I get carried into the chamber.
Yeah.
You know? Something like that.
This is why we're not politicians.
Yeah, this is exactly it. Yeah.
Cool. I think we've pretty much sorted out the whole budget there. That very complicated,
Oh.
long document.
So easy.
Well done, us. We've solved Wales.
This is always the tricky thing about recording this podcast on a Monday. When stuff happens on a Tuesday or Wednesday, we're then like, by the time we're doing it, we don't really want to report stuff as, oh, this has happened, because people have already done that. We want to kind of look at the permutations.
Yeah, we're not the news.
No.
You know,
this
watch
is-
the news
exactly.
and then come to us.
This is why Craig David phoned in that song for 7 days when he was like, and Thursday and Friday and Saturday, because he didn't know what was going to happen. He
No,
wrote
he
it
had
on a
no idea.
Monday,
Yeah.
and he sort of
Day
just...
of reckoning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Christmas is coming.
You sound like Mark Drakefod. The day of reckoning is coming.
The day of reckoning is coming.
It's
First of
not.
day.
We are going to be releasing podcasts over Christmas, but we're going to record a few in advance. So if Mark Drakeford does something horrific or...
Definitely pick that up.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I mean, emergency pod button hit if he does something awful.
So if something big happens in Welsh politics, if something massive, we'll probably just do like a Zoom one. We'll do one of the emergency pods, won't we? But what have we got coming up? We've got a listener questions.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we've compiled some of our questions that we've received over the last couple of months, and we're going to go through them. And then we've got one where we're going to make some predictions.
Brilliant. Well, I can't wait.
It's going to be very, very
Oh,
fun.
we also have a little Christmassy quiz.
Yeah, so...
Yes.
You've written a Christmassy quiz,
I've
haven't
written
you?
a Christmassy quiz. It's not very Christmassy, but it's very Welsh politicsy. And so I'm just going to test your guys' knowledge.
I can't wait for that one.
Yeah.
Do you like a quiz?
I love a quiz.
Brilliant. Well, guys, I hope you enjoy the episode.
Cool. Who are you guys?
My name is Robin Morgan. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm a writer. I'm the co-host of this podcast. You're listening to my voice right now. I never know what to say at this bit.
No, just pick yourself up, man.
Hi, I'm Robin. follow me on social media.
Hi, I am Mel Owen. I am a comedian. I'm a writer. I have a show at the Millennium Centre on the 8th of February. If anybody would like to make my Christmas, please buy a ticket on the Millennium Centre.
Millennium Centre. That's fucking awesome.
Thank you. At the Millennium Centre's website, please. Thank you.
My name's Will Hayward. I have a newsletter which is imaginary.
Imaginary. Bloody hell, you bang on about it enough. You made it
People are
up.
paying for that, Will. Start writing it, mate.
I have a newsletter which is essentially the front page for my journalism. So if you like what I do, that's how you can fund it. If you Google the Will Hayward newsletter, you can sign up. There is a free option. You can also pay a little bit a month, or you can do an annual subscription, or you could give it as a gift to a loved one who has insomnia.
Or you can do what we do, is just hang out with you and we get it for free.
Yeah. I pay him for that.
Oh,
though.
do you?
Yeah.
Bloody
An
hell.
annual subscription.
Oh.
That's a nice idea for Christmas, though, for like for a Welsh politics fan in your life.
Yeah, support Welsh journalism.
Yeah.
Help, fund me, Tiny Tim of journalism.
What you do?
And finally, big thanks to the guys at HayMan Media, where we record this podcast in Newport. They do podcasts, they do video, they do pictures. If you look on the newsletter, you'll see some amazing images. That was Rob, who does the pictures for HayMan. They do really, really cool stuff for not just within politics. They also do lots of commercial stuff as well. So give them a shout. They are great. They are hungover from their Christmas party last week, but they are good. They are good at what they do.
We love them.
They also make a very good coffee.
I'm going to go and get another one now, actually.
Yeah,
guys,
yeah.
If we could wrap it up.
Rob.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch.
Ta-da!